All right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So I'm here today with my great friend Vin. I love you, man. I just think you're brilliant, and I love our conversations. I loved all our conversations we've had. We've had a conversation in the past for the podcast, and there's a link to that, listeners. If you want to link in, if you want a bit of background to this, you don't need to listen to one before you listen to another. Welcome to the show. Great to be doing this episode with you.
Thanks, Simon. It's great to be back. Love chatting to you and love you heaps. And we have a great rapport, and it's really great to be back. So thanks for having me.
So the context, listeners, to this is Vin helped me to some massive learnings last week, right? So in a traditional kind of mentor and mentee or coach and coachee relationship, one person is the person that knows and the other person is the person that learns. What I've realized with conversations with Vin and others is that actually it's far more dynamic than that. So we're both learning off one another. It changes according to it changes during any conversation. So at one point I'm asking I'm asking Vin a question, and the other time he's asking me. So Vin helped me to a massive realization last week, which is essentially I've been kind of comparing myself and my podcast, right? The Thriving Adoptees podcast to other podcasts. And in terms of the number of downloads. And what Vin essentially said to me is, look, you're getting a bit mixed up here. This is about quality, not quantity. And you've got less downloads, but you're having more impact. And that's because some other podcasts are basically just stories, and they are people are expressing their stories, and that story is being reinforced. And the reason that really scares me is because if you were to look inside my head and my heart and see the false story that I've told myself about myself, it would be really scary. And I would basically, you would be indulging me in what is a work of fiction. So does that, reinforcing this negative self-image of me and reinforcing me as being stuck in the story. Now, that kind of makes perfect sense to me, but does it make any sense to you then?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense to me. And validating people's stories is a really, really important thing to do. And just to add to your comments, you're on a different caliber, and what you do is you help people, you coach people, and you're at the next level where people are when people are wanting to heal and work through things. That's the level that you're on, and that is a step above telling your story, because when you first tell your story, you get really emotional, and sometimes people have been voiceless for years and they haven't been able to even open their mouth to say anything. So when they get to these podcasts, or they get to these people that are willing to listen to their story and give them a platform to tell their story, it's so important. However, there's also another level to that, and that's where you come in. You're the other level where it's giving them a platform to work through past their story and work through their story. And that's a really important step to bettering your mental health and understanding a lot about yourself and your surroundings and your past as well. So that's a really important thing. Like they're both just as important as each other.
Okay. Wow. Okay. That really helps me. Again, I'm doing this comparing, and you're doing a building, right? So I first realized that the story. I first got a chance to share my story in 2009 on a retreat, and we spent a week of 5 days sharing our stories and separating from them. So realizing this, that we got everything out on the table, we shared everything out, and then we realized that the story in our head was a work of fiction. It was made up. It wasn't the truth of who we are. So here we are in 2022. This may go out in 2023. I don't know. Probably not. I'll probably try and squeeze it out before Christmas. So yeah, 2000. So 13 years ago, I started sharing my story and separating, because we're not a story. A story is in the past. It's what happened to us, and what happens to us isn't us. It's not what we're about. So, yeah. And in terms of the level, I see this as 13 years on, I'm still as curious. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to up level. I'm still trying to get a clearer and better idea of who I am. I'm still seeking to separate myself more from my story. So like I've been on a year-long membership with a mentor called Claire Diamond, and it renews, and I'll be on it next year. I'll be on it next year as well. So I'm investing my time and money in that constant learning process. And I learn. I'm consuming audiobooks and learnings like on my own for like an hour and a half, an hour and 3/4 a day, on top of all the conversations I have with adoptees. So this is, on a good day, this is a passion, and on a bad day, it's an obsession, right? Depending on my mood. So yeah. I wanted to thank you for helping me on and making me aware of my comparisonitis. Yeah. So comparisonitis is a disease where we compare each other to others, and so we might do it on our looks, we might do it on our weight. So I'm still needing to shift the love handles. We may do it on our the grayness of our hair. We may do it on our bank balance. We may do it, as I've been doing it, on this downloads competition. People have other adoption podcasts have more downloads than me, and that's how my comparisonitis presents. That's the symptom of this little disease called comparisonitis.
I think it's human nature to compare, and even though we preach and say, it's always bad to compare, and it's always, everyone's different and everyone's an individual, but I think it's just human nature. I think it's just in us to compare. Something is always never good enough, and that's just a part of learning and a part of growing. That's what makes us human.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to challenge you slightly on that. I'm going to just change a couple of letters. Actually, I would say that's human nurture.
Yeah,
not human nature. I think we learn to do that by absorbing that behavior from the world around us, especially, and social media makes it so much easier to compare.
Yes.
And we all know about that. So. Yeah. Vin's a lifelong learner as well. So you've been on this course, haven't you? This leadership in the community course down in
yes.
And you created a video which you kindly sent to me, and you went. So the background and the the video is private, and it was created by Vin for this to express himself to the fellow members on this leadership course, leadership in the community. And he kindly sent me a copy of it, and it is really, really profound. And I wanted to, I thought it would be a great kicking off point for an episode of the podcast. That she's going to be a slightly different format to ones that we've done before. Now, as I scribbled down, I think it's the second sentence on that video. You say, if no one else can love me, then how am I to love myself? That's how I scribbled it down. Does that sound about right?
That's exactly what I said. Yep.
Yeah. And the background to this is that this is the way that you were feeling on the back of a breakup, right? I think you.
Yes, that's correct. So that little snippet of the video was a part of a much longer video. And just to put it into just a little bit of context, in the sense of, you did a great job. I just want to add a little bit further to that. So this video, we had to present to this group who we were, and we could do it in any form that we wanted, whether it would be written or a presentation, or through words, visual, anything. And it was basically creative freedom to present to a group just a little bit about who you are. And so at the time, I put all this together, and this is what makes up who I am, and the good, the bad, the ugly, the shit, all of it. And I had just gone through a breakup, and it was probably the most life-changing thing I've ever gone through. And it was the most heartbreaking thing I've ever gone through. And it stripped me down to absolutely nothing. And I had to find a spot to rebuild from nothing. But it wasn't anyone's fault. And if there was fault, it was my own. Because I had allowed myself to be stripped to nothing. And it was, I suppose, the first time I had ever truly felt the full force of what it is like to love, and I suppose accept love fully. And it was profound, and something I will probably may not ever find again. However, in that video, with those words that you read, how am I meant to be loved if no one can love me? How am I meant to love myself if no one can love me? Now, that's a question I think I've been asking myself my entire life. As an adoptee, we all have these narratives of what we're told from our birth parents, or first parents, or whatever term you want to use. And in my case, on my adoption records, it did say that I was a shame to the family, and that's why they gave me up. Now, knowing that, and then trying to have any type of relationship with anyone, whether it be a love relationship or just a friendship or a family connection or whatever, knowing that is very difficult, because that kind of fucks with your narrative of everything, and you question everything. You question people's motives. You shouldn't, but the whole narrative of, especially when you're adopted, if my own parents and family couldn't love me and they gave me away because of that, then how is anyone else meant to love me? And there is some aspect of victim mentality when you're younger, because I suppose that's all you know, and you go through life before understanding that. But even as an adult, I'm not even sure if I fully understand it. And that's, I suppose, the confusing part to me is how am I meant to be loved if I feel like no one can love me, if people walk away, or, um, that word forever. That's a shit word, and I hate that word because everything changes. And I sound really doomy and gloomy right now. However, in my
We're
in
going to get to the good bit, all right, ladies and gentlemen.
yes, we will get to the good bit. Um, but my experiences have been that people have walked away, and I run a parent group, and I ask my parents. Well, actually, parents have asked me and the adoptee team, what is enough? And sometimes I say to myself, I don't know what would be enough, because I always say love isn't enough, but then they throw back, which is a very valid question, what is enough? And it makes me think. I have no idea what would be enough, because each case and each person is individual, and I mean I don't even know what would be enough for me. Um, so that's almost an impossible question to answer. What is enough? What you know? So
What is enough?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the mind goes into hyperdrive because the mind, there's never enough for the mind.
yeah,
I came up with this phrase. So I was about 3 years ago. I was this time here actually. I was, and I may have mentioned this. I mentioned this yesterday on, I don't know if it was a podcast or whether it's just so listeners, I pretty much always talk to the guests before they come on the show. So I'm not sure whether this is a pre-podcast conversation or a conversation I have. But yeah, three years ago, I was sitting in a room with some nothing to do with adoption. This was with some fellow entrepreneurs. Yeah, just hold on a minute. I'm going to have to pause the recording. Just hold on. Yeah, that was the joiner, ladies and gentlemen. Fixing some window catches. Here we are. This is the thing, right? We're dealing with such profound issues, but we're also dealing with the logistics of life. So no apologies. And I was listening to a speaker, and it was a great guy, and I was just, this word just came to me. Enough, right? Enough. You are enough, Simon. Right. So normally the little voice in my head is he's critiquing, he's criticizing me. It's an inner critic, right? But every now and again, not very often, the voice in my head says something nice to me instead of something nasty. And it was just like, enough. Simon, you are enough. And there was a relief. So I talk about the agony of not feeling enough, the relief of feeling enough, and the ecstasy of infinity, the ecstasy of being the whole universe, right? So that's what when I mean by level. What I mean by leveling up is, is that journey. It's that journey from sufficiency, enough. From insufficiency to sufficiency to infinity, right?
yeah,
So maybe again a bit, So, but the mind is stuck in the mind is stuck in the enough or not enough stuff. right? So, so when will I be? And relating this back to myself, right? And a lesson that I'm still learning is basically, and you helped me with, is like, so when am I going to have enough podcast downloads to make me happy, right?
Yeah.
I'm looking in the wrong, as a mentor of mine says, Richard Wilkins said, how long will it take you to find something if you're looking in the wrong place, right? Yeah. If I'm looking for a feeling from a download figure, right? So if I'm looking for happiness in my Simplecast dashboard that tells me how many down, it's ludicrous, isn't it? It's ludicrous, and yet
it's how
we
you
all
feel.
do it to a certain extent.
Yeah, and I think it's the validation that you're looking for, like in the sense of you're looking for validation in that, and if that's that, it becomes a different question then of what will be enough, and that answer to that question isn't on that dashboard.
It's not.
I don't think.
And most of the time, I'm not actually looking. I'm not looking for validation. I'm looking for validation in the number of podcast downloads. I'm confused about why there aren't more downloads. Do you see what I mean? So
yeah, and
it's a curiosity thing. It's not. I don't. And the reason I know that that's the truth is, in my old business, I spent 20 years thinking, when am I going to? Well, as the leader of the organization. So when I worked for my dad, everything was, as far as I was concerned, it was down to him. When I took over from him in 96 to when I sold the business in 2011, so that's what, 15 years. I spent 15 years night and day thinking about the next sale, the next turnover, right?
Yeah.
So I don't, the idea of chasing turnover and chasing downloads, it's completely different. I'm not seeking validation in the number of downloads. I'm just concerned about why it's not happening. But so that kind of that thing comes and goes now, and it's a rare occurrence. That takes me on to my question for you. So I'm going to go back to the start, right? You say, if no one else can love me, then how am I to love myself? So is that that you said? I think you said that that was a question you'd been asking yourself since childhood, yeah?
Yeah.
And do you still ask it? Do you still ask it?
I do.
No,
I do every day. One of my best friends, we're having a chat, and he said to me, "You never stop loving someone. You just love the next person more." And that was I think, one of the most important sentences or phrases I think I've ever heard in my life, because it made so much sense. And it's true, because I thought back when he said that, I thought back and I thought, he's right. I haven't stopped loving anyone. I've just loved the next person more, or well, yeah. And it's not to say that I didn't love the last person less. It just means that, it was different, and yeah.
So I think, did you say you're to me on Thursday? Are you 36 now? Do you say? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, 36.
Yes.
So I'm 55, and I have had the thought about my birth mother not loving me enough to keep me for 40 seconds of my life.
Yeah.
40 seconds, right? in 55 years. I've been
It's
conscious of
very
that.
lucky.
Very lucky. You know, my primal wound is like a paper cut.
Mm.
Some people's primal wound is more like a shark attack.
It's and see, I have the book, The Primal Wound, and I've read half of it, and a lot of it isn't in relation to me. It is written now. Correct me if I'm wrong. From my understanding, it's a domestic adoption, and the adoption isn't the child isn't of color, who the parent is talking about, and the fact that it's written by an adoptive parent. Now, one of the most interesting facts for me is that when I was going through turmoil in the adoption community a few years ago, I kept getting referred to this Primal Wound book and got told that I didn't even understand my own primal wounds. And it's very true. At the time, I was like, what are you talking about? But I I brought the book and I read half of it and I put it down because it didn't it 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 was completely different. Yes, there were definitely highlighted a lot of issues. Um, some I dealt with, some I hadn't, some I'd never even heard of. Um, however, it didn't relate to me in a lot of senses because I'm an international adoptee and I'm of color. So it doesn't refer to anything like that. So, and it's written by an adoptive parent. And I just found it ironic that all these adoptees were throwing this book at me saying, you should read this. And this is these are the adoptee issues that we're having. And I don't think a lot of adoptees realize it's actually written by an adoptive parent. And I just thought that was really interesting. But I think I do have a lot of primal wounds. And it's not to say that I'll never be loved or I have never been loved, because I know I have been. However, I think that voice in my head of I'm never going to be fully loved ever again like I was last year, that scares that living fuck out of me.
Yeah.
It really does.
It is a very scary thought.
It is. And
It's a very scary feeling.
yeah. And it
Who wants to be alone, right?
yeah. I mean, it's 7 days away from when when it's almost a year since we broke up, and that day scares the crap out of me. And this year has been extremely difficult. One of the hardest years of my life, and it's been a struggle to stay alive. It really has. And one of the reasons why I was able to stay alive was because of this leadership program and because of the people in it, and what I learned about myself. However, it's still a struggle. It doesn't take away those emotions and those feelings, um, and it's really difficult because I I thought that this was it. This was you know going this was forever,
Yeah.
only to find out that I was I I love hard, and I think that's my blessing and my curse.
Yeah. So I want to share a little bit more. Go back to that my
Yep.
40 seconds, because it is a paper cut compared to a shark attack, a shark bite, or it's, I don't know, in trauma terms, it's it's a storm in a teacup, isn't it? It's a trauma in a teacup compared to
Yeah.
an oil tanker, you know. Um, uh, and I think that makes it easier for me to see stuff.
Yeah.
And it's made, I regularly say to people that my life has been a walk in the park compared to most adoptees. And yet the insights still matter. My main mentor back in the day, and hopefully I'm going to be chatting to her soon again, back in 2009, she was sexually abused by her dad as a young girl. So, and she managed to get through that eventually, and then go on to inspire others, including me. So, if she can get through that, then, in my opinion, anybody can get through anything. And your life has been really, really tricky, and you're still here, which we're delighted. I'm delighted that you are. I said to this trainer lady 15 years ago, my birth mother didn't effing love me enough to effing keep me.
Mm-hmm.
And the teddy bear was some sort of effing consolation prize.
Mm-hmm.
And in her reaction to that was not to validate me. Her reaction was, in the moment, was to say, I'm a mum, Simon, and I don't think it was quite like that.
That's interesting.
And with that comment, the eruption of anger that had occurred stopped. Right? So the volcano that had spewed out all this anger towards my birth mother, which I had never felt before, I'd never given my birth mother a second thought, right? And I was 40. Again, people say, well, you suppressed it, Simon. Who knows? I mean, shrinks can make anything link with anything. They're bright people. Who knows? Maybe they're right. Maybe they're wrong. To what extent? Who knows? I mean, it's a minefield. It's a trauma hole that what's the word I'm looking for? It's a rabbit hole that we don't need to go down. Whether just like the truth was, when she challenged me, the volcano stopped erupting. And I often say there was a little bit of white smoke coming out the top of the volcano, like they do when it's not quite extinct. And that and some business stuff that was going on for me at the time, around that time, within that year or so, that kickstarted my learning journey, which eventually led me to doing this, right? So when somebody shares an opinion, when somebody asks us a coaching question, it can profoundly, well, in this occasion, it profoundly stopped me. It stopped my volcano erupting in its tracks. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you, with your permission, a kind of a coachy kind of question based on what you said at the start of the video, right? So, if no one else can love me, then how am I to love myself?
Mm-hmm.
Can you see any, what's the word? Can you see an assumption in that? Can you see something that's perhaps not true in that? Or yeah, can you see an assumption in that?
That's a very layered question.
Yeah,
Because I all my life I've had, and this is the tricky thing about this, is because I don't want to come off like I'm a victim, or I've got the victim mentality, because I'm not a victim. Um, it's very hard to I suppose talk about certain things without sounding like a victim as well. So I just want to be conscious of that. But all in answer to that question, it is very layered, because there's always been layers of me not loving myself, and there's always been reasons for me to not love myself, whether it be my own inner voices, or inner demons, and outside external people. Kids are little turds, so they'll say anything to be idiots and assholes to you. And you constantly fear what people, well, I constantly fear what people think of me. I used to, a lot more than I do now. That comes with growing up and getting older. I think every year you level up, you also drop down a level, of you let go of a whole heap of crap that you hang on to, and it's excess baggage. So it is it's layered, and there's probably not a simple answer to that. um will I ever love myself? I love parts. There's not a lot. um I'm also very conscious that uh I'm trying to be as real as I can without airing my full soul here to public. But also too, I want to be authentic. I want to be real, and sometimes you don't get a lot of people that will talk about anything like this, because this is too real for them. But I am authentic, and I do want to talk about this, because it's never, especially from males, it's never spoken about. You don't really get a lot of males talking about this stuff, and especially this in depth either. So I also want to be, real for that reason as well. Well, I'm a few years ago, I stopped being fake, because people liked me for the fake me and not the real me. And when I started becoming the real me, people dropped off, because I didn't fit their box anymore, and I was not in a box anymore. But yes, no. To your answer to your question, there it is very layered, and there's no simple answer.
okay.
So
So
yeah,
so there is, to my question. I mean, love is a many splendid thing, a many layered thing. Love is a many splendid thing, as a song, right?
yes, yes,
Yeah, I did a podcast. I released a podcast today, and I put "It's a heartache." It's an
yeah.
how do we? It's a heartache, and I was. Shall I put? Is this Rod Stewart or Bonnie Tyler? Like it's a heartache. So I didn't. I resisted. Maybe I should go back into the episode and change it.
Sure.
Right. So love is a very. I love it. Love is a very splendid thing. I think it's from Greece, the movie, actually.
No, it's from Moulin Rouge.
It's Moulin Rouge, is it? Okay. I really did not like that movie at all. I'm not a fan of musicals. People just start singing for no reason whatsoever.
Oh, funny you say that. I watched Spirited last night, and I'm not a fan of Will Ferrell. However, I will say it's one of the best Christmas movies I think I've ever seen in my life. And I'm not a fan of musicals either, but yeah, it
Yeah.
was a brilliant movie.
Here's continue on that theme before we go back to the main
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
Some friends of ours went to London to see Elf the musical,
Oh, yeah.
and then messaged my wife to say there's lots of kids here. Like, do do we see the insanity of the thoughts that go through our head? How it's Elf the musical. It's the run up to Christmas. How could there not be kids there? It's for kids. Are you nuts? And she wasn't doing it ironically, right? But this is how blind we get to the stuff, right? So love is a many splendid thing. It's from Moulin Rouge, which I've never watched.
To be honest, I've never actually seen it either. I just know the
but
song.
there is a massive assumption that is staring me in the face, right? If no one else can love me, then how can I? Then how am I to love myself? The assumption is that you need love from the outside. You need love from somebody else to love yourself, and that is a massive, massive assumption that is totally and utterly wrong.
It's funny you say that because I actually never really clicked into it just then when you said it. And I thought, why do I need other people to love me in order to love myself? And I think I am definitely not alone in that thought.
Totally,
And
totally.
Yeah,
We all fall for that. You know, I thought it too, but it's not
yeah,
true.
I've never even realized or picked up on that. But for some reason, I I think it's the whole, well, it's like when you have a friendship and you're doing all the work and then, you know, you get stuff all back in return and you think to yourself, is it worth it? Um, and then I start questioning, shit, what am I doing wrong? Am I doing enough? Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I think this? Should I think that? And you go through like a rabbit hole of tunnels going, shit, what is it about me? Should I talk more? Should I talk less? Should I say this? Should I say that? Should I do this or not do that? Or, oh, it's like a freaking
Yeah,
minefield. And
that's what minds do. Me too.
oh,
I mean, we started
it's,
this. We started this conversation. We started before we hit record. I shared with Vin about a bust up I'd had with a friend on Friday night, which it was kind of a return to a bust up a year ago, which hasn't been raised. The other party hasn't raised it, and for a year, and then it's come back up again, and I really struggle with it. So I thought it was kind of like done and dusted. I'm like, oh, it's come back again. But I want to take you back to it. So,
yeah.
So we're talking about love from two perspectives here, right? So we're talking about the love between a mother and a son, and we're talking about romantic love as well. And kind of we're getting those mixed up. We're getting those. It's all love to us, right? And what's love got to do with it but second-hand emotion, as Tina Turner would say. But we get very confused. Let me say, I get very confused about that, and I get the kind, and I think we all do, and I think, like, with the greatest respect, you have as well. And somebody told me this. I had a member of staff who said this. He said to me, when somebody says the greatest respect, Simon, they mean exactly the opposite. Then 6 months later, he said to me, with the greatest respect, Simon. I said, Andy, you told me 6 months ago, and I remembered that. But I'm not coming from that. And he went, and laughed. But, he was a bit of a muppet. I was the muppet that employed him. I was the muppet that employed him. Despite, like, we're talking about romantic loves, like you see a bad boy or a bad girl, and we want them, right? We want them, and everything in our body is saying, no, this is another bad boy or another bad girl. This one's not going to work out. When I interviewed this guy Andy, right, my first reaction was no. Anyway, I was interviewing for a sales job, and he presented quite well as a salesman, and I hired him. So, and I kept on doing this. I kept on making mistakes. Anyway, so we go for these, despite everybody bone in our body, right? So let me try it another way around then. So let me try this question another way around. Right. Vin, I started our conversation by telling you that I love you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're different sexualities, so you knew that I didn't mean it romantically, right? So,
Yeah.
can you say that we're different sexualities? I don't,
I don't know. I've never heard that.
Right. I've never heard myself say that, but like, right. So here you are, Vin. I love you. Can you now love yourself? Because I've loved you, and your
Yeah.
premise was you can't love yourself until somebody else loves you, right? So
Yeah.
I love you. Can you now love yourself?
Well, I mean, I would love to say yes. I don't. It's such a. And I get what you're trying to like do, and I should be able to go yes. Thank you for
Well,
your
yeah.
love. I love you,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
and I should be able to accept that. When you talked about before about the different kind of loves between romantic and a mother's love, that is very different, and for me that's something that I definitely keep separate. One of the things um, that I was told when I was younger was, I'm not your friend, I'm your parent. And that's a really important thing to remember, not necessarily a warming thing. However, it's important because parents are there to put boundaries in and to teach you boundaries and to teach you certain things. Friends do that differently. They're there to help you and have fun adventures and all that stuff. And you have to make the distinction. And that's why I was always thankful for that line that was said, because it helped me make that distinction. And it's really important to know the difference. Um, I think with parents as a whole, we have these expectations, and if they don't meet those expectations, we can kind of feel disappointed. But I suppose the layer of adoption, when that comes into it, you're not, because you don't have high expectations anyway. I mean, I don't. Um, I, I think it's more or less, as there's a bar of, well, the bar of disappointment, instead of the opposite way around, where you have a bar of, this is what they should reach, whereas mine's kind of the opposite of the disappointment. And it's like every time I get a no, or something that I don't like to hear, it goes higher to that bar, and it's just like, oh well, I expected that, you know. So I don't know if other adoptees are like that. It's not to say that I do that all the time, or at all anymore, but that's what I used to do when I was younger. Every time I did something or said something and I got a response that I didn't like, I was like, well, you know, I knew that was coming, or but also that comes with age as well. You mature as you grow and get older. Well, I hope you do. And you learn different things, you expect different things, and your expectations are different as you get older. Whereas when you're a kid, you don't understand any of that. And I've probably just totally gone off on a tangent. But
Well, this is what minds do. So I'm learning some stuff at the moment in terms of like a different definition of love. Okay.
yeah,
And it's the absence of separation.
yeah,
Love, like the absence. I heard it beautifully. I didn't write it down though yesterday. Love is realizing there's no such thing as others.
yeah,
Love is realizing that the people that you thought are others aren't. So let me give you. Did I talk to you about my swimming pool metaphor last week? Did I tell you that about
No.
that? Okay. So this time of the year, my swimming pool shuts for cleaning and maintenance. So I have to go to another swimming pool if I want to go to swim. It's a huge swimming pool. It's 60 yards long, 50 meters long, right? And it's got a barrier that comes from the floor of the swimming pool to make it into two small swimming pools, so that they can have two races going on rather than one. Okay. So, as I read a letter from my birth mother 8 years ago about the teddy bear and about why she bought it, or asking the social worker for permission to buy the teddy bear so she could send it on to me, right? The tears came flushing down my face, and the tears wiped away the 40 seconds of incredibly painful anger towards her. Okay. And in that moment, we became one. So, going back to the swimming pool metaphor, I was one small swimming pool. She was another small swimming pool. The barrier between us, my anger, separated us. There was a barrier between us. The barrier instantaneously dropped to the floor of the between the two swimming pools to make the one swimming pool one. Sorry, to make the two swimming pools one. And I felt that I was her and she was me. So I'm merging. I'm putting my fingers, merging two hands across on the video screen here. So two became one. So we're back to music, and it's the Spice Girls, isn't it? It's that Christmas song, Two Become One, right? Love, two become one. Love is when two become one, or when one becomes kind of infinity, right? Going back to my other thing. So that's love. So, and that's who we are. So what we're doing is we're looking outside us for something that we already are. We are all one. You know, as the guy says, we're one spiritual being having 7 billion human experiences. One spiritual being. Another way of saying one spiritual being is love. And love is about infinity and about as in no limits, no barriers between us, no limits to ourselves. And this is getting really perhaps getting a little bit abstract, but you know, this is kind of what we're exploring, because this is where the answers are. Like, I believe that we can't love ourselves until we know ourselves. And when I say know, I don't mean intellectually. I don't mean a theory in our head. I mean an embodied experience that we feel. So it's not thinking that we are one, it's feeling that we are one. And feelings take a lot longer to shift than thoughts.
Yeah.
Beliefs can be busted just like that, right? So I heard a great example from my main the main author I'm listening to at the moment is a guy called Rupert Spira, and he said, listening to him this morning, he's saying, like, beliefs change far faster than feelings. So and he used the example, it's nearly Christmas, right? So, you know, when we see our dad at the bottom of our bed, putting the presents out at 3:00 on Christmas morning, our belief in Santa is shattered, right? But the feeling the feeling of not being enough, the feeling of not being enough, not being sufficient, not being loved. That takes that's a lifetime's work, seeing that more clearly.
Mm.
It's this is why I'm still learning stuff, still consuming this stuff, like 14 years on. 14 years on, I'm
I think
still.
you'll keep doing that for the rest of your life, and I think
Indeed.
you're definitely right when you say feelings are different to thoughts. I mean that's just a given. However, I'm still going for walks at nighttime and bawling my eyes out over a breakup that was almost a year ago.
Yeah.
And
What if that was okay? What if that was okay? What if there's
and
nothing wrong with that?
I don't I, I don't think there is anything wrong with that. And I don't ever claim to have my shit together. I never claim to have my shit together. Um, you know, I that my statement was said because I don't feel you're right. I for some reason it makes no sense now when when you ask me that question. You know, I how are other people meant to love me if I don't love myself? But I think another question is how do I love myself? When will I love myself? What does that look like? What will be enough for me to turn around and say I love myself? Um, you know, I
When you know yourself.
and that's the thing. That's one of the most confusing things for me is because, and I'm gonna go like talk a little bit of context with this, if that's okay, just a little bit
Sure.
of latitude. One of the things that I struggle with, and I've always struggled with, is my sexuality. You know, sometimes I think it's easier for for me to tell people that I'm gay because it's just easier to simplify it for them in their own minds. I don't give a shit what I am or what label people put on me. You know, for me it's the personality, and people like to put you in a box and label you because it's simple for them. And you know, in as time has gone on, I don't give a shit about that. And sometimes I still get confused whether I like males or females, or you know, and it doesn't have to be one or the other or whatever. And knowing yourself, well, like that's gonna I'm probably gonna take the rest of my life to know myself. You know, I'm never gonna stop learning about myself, and people just expect you to have your shit together, and that's never gonna happen. And if I was
Staying
to
curious is good,
repeat,
right? Staying
well,
staying curious is good.
yeah, and the thing is like um you know, it's a constant struggle in my mind with who I am, because at the roots, I don't know who I am. I have information that tells me where the first 10 months of my life started, but for 2 weeks of the very first 2 weeks of my life, it's undocumented. No one knows anything. So even still, from 2 weeks old to 10 months old, it's whatever's written on paper. And is that even true?
Well,
So,
identity is a identity is a very um, sorry, it's a term that's defined very differently for different people. So, I think the first time my first big lesson was I spent 5 days exploring the fact that I am not the voice in my head, that
mm,
I am not my inner critic, right? We spent 5 days on that. Well, you're not your story, Simon, and you're not the voice in your head. 5 days doing that. I mean, this is deep stuff, right? And yeah, like you think, well, I'm not my voice in my head. Yeah, I've got that. I've got that. It's like a
If
depth of learning.
you're not your story, then what are you?
Uh, you're you're the whole universe.
I
Your
mean, because
consciousness. Different
I
people
think
call it like I'm like identity. You know, I joke about this. I say, right. I think another prompt that kind of that got me thinking about identity differently is you know, when I was given, I went in to be given. I think they said it was going to be my original birth certificate, but I was going to get some documentation. I don't know. I can't remember what it was, but I saw my birth mother's name on it, and I was kind of expecting that. But then underneath it said, you know, name at birth, David Anthony Flower, and I thought, oh, I've had two names, right? Like, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then a bit later on, I thought, well, um, if I have the truth is always true, okay? Truth, that's the whole thing about the truth. It doesn't change. Yeah. Like, so the thing that I always hear
I
about
think there's
example.
I think there's different levels of the truth. It
Yeah.
can be.
Yeah,
It can be different.
there's definitely different levels to identity. So the short answer to the question is who are we? We are different people call it different things, right? So some people call it love. We are love. Right? Some people call it consciousness. We are consciousness. Some people call it spirit. Some people call it chi. Some people would like to call it life force. Some people call it God. Right. That's at the I've never used this word, so I'm quite pleased to be able to do it. So at the meta level, I think that's the big level. You know, I find it really irritating when I listen to this stuff and people say it doesn't matter really what we call yourself. Yes, of course it matters what we call ourselves. So let's just go for the love one, right? So when we realize that we are love, all of us are love. It's one single, you know, one spiritual being called love, means that we don't look for it outside us. That this and as I'm saying this, I'm thinking this is nuts. And I've only been looking at it at this sort of level for probably 2 years. So I'm not. Rupert Spira is the man to look at this stuff. If listeners want to, but he looks at it from a place of no context, as in for all of us. Interestingly, so he's not looking at through life through an adoption lens, right? So he's not adopted, but he does say that he was very interested in this question as a kid, and then had been going out with a girl for a couple of years, and then he rang her one night, and she ended the relationship. And at that point, he kind of doubled down on answering the question: where's happiness going to come from, and who am I? So, yeah, identity, as if we are love, then we don't need it from other people. But I'm clearly I'm talking about this message, but I'm still with my wife. I haven't gone and lived in a cave as a solo guy. Relationships are still very important to us, clearly, and to me. So I don't know what you make of all that.
I don't know what to make of that either.
Yeah.
But
perhaps a good place to end, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, like Yeah, it's food for thought.
It is.
Food for thought. Yes.
So, listeners, if you thanks for listening in. You've been an epic audience if you've got this far. I'm doing a workshop on the 3rd of January. Going to be exploring we're going to be a Zoom webinar. We're going to be exploring the primal wound, and it's called Whole: Healing My Primal Wound. Vin's coming, and a few other people.
Yes.
And I'll leave you with an interesting question, perhaps, that I think the numbers for every review of, so Nancy Verrio's book, The Primal Wound, has something like 300 reviews, I think, on Amazon. And her second book, Healing, has something like 50. And I was thinking, so why aren't people, what's that saying? And the numbers might be slightly wrong. What's that saying about our desire to heal if only, it's a 1-6 or 1-8 ratio? What's that saying about our desire to heal? Interesting stuff. Thanks, Vin. You've been an absolute star. I've loved every moment of this.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for giving a platform to talk about the nitty-gritty, real emotional, raw stuff. So thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm going to finish the recording now, and we'll just have we'll have a follow up. Right? So don't disappear, Vin. I don't want you to disappear, my friend. Thanks, listeners. Speak to you soon. Cheers. Bye.